everyone, so this week I have Baxter here with me. You've probably seen him all over our social media. So Baxter has been a huge help for my mental health, but also he comes into the office a couple of times a week, which the girls absolutely love. I just wanted to introduce Baxter. Oh, he's trying to lick me now. And basically this week I'm going to talk about how you can return to work after being off sick, and basically just go through some really basic tips of things that you might want to consider. Because, you know, returning from work having had a mental health condition can be actually really daunting, it can be really scary, and it could just be, oh, Baxter's going. It could also be that you've been off for a really long time, so you're not really sure how you feel about speaking to your employer, about speaking to your colleagues who you might not have seen for a long time. And also, you might have gone off because of something that happened at work. So there's quite a lot of things that you need to stack up and make sure that it's something that you actually want to do. So my first tip would be to make sure that you're okay to go back to work. Often, if people go back to work too soon, what we find is that they actually end up relapsing, or they end up having more time off work. So the key thing here is to check in with yourself and see whether you feel that you're ready to go back, but also speak to your GP, and if you're having any therapy, speak to your therapist and see whether or not that's something that they think is the right thing for you to do at this point in time. So once you have decided to go back, this is like definitely one of the most nerve-wracking things I've ever had to do. It's about making you feel like you're in a psychologically safe place. Something that I always use when I'm talking to employers when they're trying to support employees back to work. But what does that mean? So to have a psychologically safe place, I think you need to clearly communicate to your employer what you need to feel safe, what you need to function to the best of your ability. And that might mean that you have to come back on a phased return to work. You might need some adjustments to your working space. So I know with myself, if there's a lot of noise, I can't really cope with concentrating on specific tasks. So is there a designated space that you can go to that's got a little bit of quiet space? Other suggestions would be flexible working hours. So whilst you're on a phased return, do you have the capability to work from home some days? If so, how does that work? What are the policies? So there's quite a lot of different things that you could explore. And my suggestion would be do that before you go back. Have a welfare meeting with your employer and discuss with them some of the things that you think need to be put in place before. And don't be scared to do that. You need to do that to make sure your return to work is effective, because if it's not effective, then both you and the employer will be back at square one, where you're on long-term sick and obviously suffering again with your mental ill health, but the employer won't really know what you want them to do when you come back. So that's the key thing to start with. Once you're back at work, it's then about that regular communication, and I think that you have a responsibility as well to make sure that it's very, very clear about what you need moving forward. Those requirements change from your perspective, but also from the perspective of your employer. So the other thing that you need to consider is approaching people within the workplace and actually talking to them about what's happened. I think it always helps where people understand what you've been going through, because often they won't really know what to say to you. People react very differently, and I think if you set the bar that actually is okay to talk about your mental health at work, you are setting a standard that other people will follow. I think it's also important to understand if there are any mental health first aiders in your workplace, mental health champions, or any policies and procedures that relate to mental health in the workplace, and make sure you know who they are, where they are, and all of that goes around it, so that if you're feeling vulnerable or if you're having a bad day, that you then are able to approach that person with relative ease, and you're also aware of the policies and procedures that are in place to support you. My final tip on returning to work would be once you have returned and fully integrated back into the workplace, what I've seen be really effective in most of my clients' workplaces is that that person then becomes a mental health champion. They're able to use their personal lived experience of their mental ill health to support others in the workplace. And it can be really empowering to have somebody who has been treated really well by an employer and has been facilitated back into the workplace to basically showcase that, you know, you can come back to work, you've got this, but ultimately that your employer have facilitated that as well. There's a lot of employers out there who are amazing and who will facilitate, but you do have to effectively communicate that to them in order for it to be effective for both you and for them. There's loads of resources available online. I will put a link to the government guidelines. There's some stuff on the Mind website. There's loads of resources, so I'll pop some links down for you. There's also, we have a guide about managing your stress. So again, once you go back, you need to be kind to yourself, but also manage that stress because, you know, it's a change to your environment. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope it's been helpful. Thank you.